What I believe is common sense, I'm learning it's not that common. It's tradition at the Sedgwick County Commission that the chairman gives out an annual award to an individual or an organization that does extraordinary work in our community. At the end of 2024, I chose to give the chairman's award to an organization called Stand Together. It's a philanthropic community doing incredible work all across the country, but is especially active right here at home with some of our biggest, most complex challenges. I invited the Wichita Director of Operations to sit down and talk about numerous topics and why Wichita has become ground zero for some rather sizable community-led investments. Sustainable progress requires bottom-up, grassroots solutions, and I'm excited to talk through all that's happening right here at home. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Stand Together's own Joe Woodward. Joe Woodward from Stand Together. Welcome, man. I'm glad you're joining today.
Great to be with you, Ryan.
I want to tell a story. I love to tell the story. You've heard me tell this story.
Does it involve an apple?
It does involve an apple. You've heard me say this. But this is indicative of where we've been the last couple of years. And my relationship with you, but also my relationship with Stand Together. And full disclosure, I gave Stand Together the Chairman's Award from the Sedgwick County Commission in 2024 for all the work you guys are doing in our community, which we're going to talk a lot about here shortly. But this story sets it up. 2 years ago, I get a call from you, and you knew that I've been active in the foster care space and advocating for these kids and these families. You said, hey, I'm flying someone into town. I've rented a room at a coffee shop. Can you spend about an hour and let's just walk us through foster care and the challenges and things? And I said, yeah, absolutely, right? Jump at that opportunity. I walk in this room, we say the pleasantries, and I cannot remember what her name was, but she was right to business. And she says, hey, tell me what you know about foster care in Wichita. And that was like a softball, here's what's going on, here's the data, here's that. And she said something, you know where I'm going with this. She said something that I think changed the landscape of what we're doing right now and set up. And she said one word or one phrase. She said, that sounds great. What if we want to take a bigger bite of this apple? Yeah. And for the next hour and a half, you went to a whiteboard and we whiteboarded ideas and thoughts and continuum of care and all of it. It was incredible. You remember this meeting?
I do.
What came of that meeting?
Yeah. Well, it's really a great example of what Stand Together is about more broadly, which is that taking a bigger bite out of the apple. Yeah. It's, oftentimes when people see these big problems, they typically think that big problems require big solutions, expert driven, whether it's DC or Topeka or your office, like Ryan, fix these problems for us. Yeah. But one of the things that Stand Together believes is the best change happens bottom up. It can't be planned out. It's not an operational issue. Our friends over at Kansas Leadership Center, these are not technical challenges, technical problems, they're adaptive challenges. Yeah. And so from that conversation, I think we identified some gaps. We identified where should we focus our energy, which was moving the faith community from a child welfare mindset, oh, these poor kids, to a child and family well-being mindset, which is how do we support families? How do we go bottom up in the biggest sense? Wow. And I think it really sparked a movement.
That was a spark, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. But because I want people to understand what's going on in the foster care community, I want people to understand who is Stand Together, what are they doing, where does it come from? But before we get there, I want people to know you. You're my friend. You're involved in a lot of different spaces. Are you a Wichita native? Give us a couple minutes. Tell us exactly who you are, where you come from.
I've lived the Wichita version of the American dream. Actually, fourth generation in my family to graduate from Wichita State. My great-grandmother went there when it was Fairmount College.
Is that right?
My grandpa, it was all different names. It was Wichita University, then the Wichita State University when my dad went there, and then just WSU when I was there. So Wichita kid, born and raised, very involved in my church, involved in school, ran track. And then pretty early on, I learned that this idea, didn't have language for it at the time, but this idea of entrepreneurship, solving problems, win-win situations. I just loved starting new things. And we say this, why are our actions here? Where's the gap between vision and reality? And I just kind of fell in love with attacking that gap between vision and reality. And it's led me some interesting places. Yeah.
Well, we're right out of college.
Yeah.
So you're Wichita State grad. What did you do right out of college? And how'd you get to the point now where you're the community director or regional director for Stand Together based out of Wichita? So what was the gap in between? What led you to this point?
Yeah, so I started from Wichita State. I had a recruiter from Koch Industries come to my class and say, hey, Coke is the land of opportunity. And we're looking for principled people who will come in and, play center field for a while. You might not love your first job, but get in, contribute, and then we're going to help you find your right fit. And 15 years later, I can say I've really experienced that. So I started in accounting and finance, did that for 3 years, and I moved over to college recruiting, ran the internship program for a couple of years, which was just a blast. And it was really this sort of deep dive into the philosophies of principle-based management, and understanding. When I was young, I thought, hey, the way to change the world is being a pastor or a missionary or something like that, which is amazing, and people should totally do that. But understanding the way that like ordinary business is a part of God's work in this world. I learned that at church. I saw that at Coke, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, it's a fallacy to believe that ministry only happens and impact only happens from behind a pulpit.
Yeah.
And that's not the history of the church. It's certainly not the history of the first 300 years of the movement of Christianity. And I've said this frequently, and we talk about this a lot in my private businesses, that this is ministry in many regards, is that we are doing ministry, we are serving people, and we should steward this, our job, our occupation, our vocation, we should steward it like ministry. So you have the same background, you have the same worldview, and you're doing it now in a bigger way.
Well, it was a blast. 10 years at Coke and then 5 years at Stand Together now. And seeing those principles of creating value in business applied to creating value in the social sector has been a blast.
Okay, let's talk Stand Together.
Yeah.
Because that is really the heart of what I want to try to dig out today. I want so badly. And you guys are kind of stealthy. I always want to draw it out and tell the world what you're doing and tell this community all that you're doing, because I'm grateful for the work Stand Together is doing now. So I want to be able to tell this story in a bigger way. And you guys, you're so humble in so many ways, and you really play behind the scenes in so many ways as connectors and conduit. But today, I want people to understand all that's going on, because I'm really proud of some things that are going on in this community right now. What is Stand Together? What do you do? Where does it come from? Give us the skinny.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons you don't see our name a lot is because it's not about us. We have the privilege of partnering with some of the best social entrepreneurs in the country. A lot of them are right here in Wichita, former gang leaders who are rebuilding their neighborhoods, educators who are doing amazing things, business leaders like yourself who are taking their business expertise and applying it to solve social problems. So the history of Stand Together is founded by Charles Koch. 300 or 400 of the most successful business leaders in the country helped form it. Over 2 million people employed by these businesses. And it's evolved into a group that includes NFL athletes and musicians and philanthropists and social entrepreneurs focused on tackling the country's biggest challenges.
Right.
And what's interesting is like you can look at big challenges like education and healthcare and generational poverty and all these things, and you see, well, gosh, there's this pull between principled approach and a pragmatic approach. And we think those two can come together because we really believe what's right also is what works, especially over time.
Yeah. I've seen these charts that I've been in several meetings now and community meetings. You talk about these principles that you advocate for and principle-based management. And we've always heard, I used to hear when I was early in my entrepreneurial career about market-based management. And then it's evolved or maybe connected somehow to principle-based management. What does that mean exactly? And how does that fit what you're trying to accomplish through Stand Together?
Yeah, so let's start big, all right? So let's start big. So it really, like these principles are articulated in the Declaration of Independence. So every other nation on earth is like founded based on like culture and ethnicity and like people groups. America was founded on an idea, that idea of universal human dignity, right? So you see human dignity called out in the Declaration. You see freedom and opportunity and all the rest, and those are those principles. But what's fun about that is when we internalize those, applying those in business and personal life and philanthropy, you see how those principles are cross-sector or cross-industry in their nature. I'll give you a quick example. So human dignity understands that people have value and they have choice, right? So honoring their choice in a business, you have to honor their dignity because if they don't voluntarily transact with you, you will go out of business.
Right.
Applying that in the same way in the nonprofit world is a little different though, right? So your customers actually don't have the power to put you out of business, only your donors do. So a principled approach to philanthropy is saying, actually, we're here to create value for our customers. How do we measure success based on what the customer says is valuable to them. It's this idea of subjective value. And so we call it customer first measurement. In the nonprofit world, we call it principle-based management, which is how to run your organization based on these principles. So across the sector, those same principles apply to public policy as well. So all over the place.
Well, and you have become a walking, talking machine of these principles. And in every meeting that we're in the community meetings, nonprofit meetings, whether it's on poverty or education or foster care, on and on and on, housing, which we're talking about frequently as of late, these principles start to manifest, and you start to weave these things through to uplift these social entrepreneurs that you're trying to empower to make these changes. And what I continue to say is, particularly with Stand Together, is they have put and they have rallied resources and relationships and other business philanthropic individuals from across the country into saying there is a better way to solve these problems. The government isn't the solution for all these problems. It is very much congenial with my worldview in regards to, no, we've got to leverage community. We've got to empower community to solve some of these really hard and complex issues. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the investment. I'm grateful that they're here in Wichita, Kansas, and that Stand Together is, and I wouldn't say this is ground zero in as much as there seems to be a lot of movement with Stand Together right here at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of in the name, right? So one is we're going to take a stand, right? So we believe in these principles, so we're going to take a stand on these principles, but we're not going to do it alone. We're going to do it together. Yeah. And I loved your example of Oklahoma City and Bentonville and places like that. What we need to be careful of is this idea of like some billionaire is going to come down and save us, right? That's not anybody's mindset. Joe. It's in the same way we don't need these big top-down solutions. The reason why Stand Together is successful is because they recognize that's actually the people of Wichita, the people of our country. Those are going to be the heroes of this story, and it's just an honor for us to support these folks. I'll give you a great example. So, gang violence is one of those where you would think that is violence is a big problem. There was something like, 2,500 cars stolen last year in Wichita. Sure. And, our crime rate's top 1%. I had a dear friend of a friend who actually spent several nights living in our home who was gunned down because of gun violence just a few weeks ago. So it hits close to home. And a lot of people would say, well, this is an issue for you to solve, or Chief Sullivan or Mayor Wu. It is a policing or government issue. Or others would say, hey, we just need to educate people more, or whatever it is, some expert-driven deal. But we found great success investing in groups like Hope for the Hood. Yes. Benny Santabanez, all of his guys.
Benny's coming on this podcast.
Is he really? Mm-hmm. I love it. I mean, those are the guys who have lived it, and they are like the real experts. Like Benny literally puts his life on the line, and his solution to crime is actually empowerment. Typically when people are doing well, they're less likely to commit crimes. And so Benny's walking with them, doing incredible people development. The way he builds his team is not some big complex org chart. He brings in other former gang leaders who have been reformed, whose lives are changed. He hires them part-time, and they're just fishing people in. That's great. Used to be he would be called the plug when he was in the gang. Yeah. So he'd be connecting people to resources. That's exactly what he's doing now.
Okay, so yes, and Benny will be on, and we're going to talk through this story because his story is radical, man, and the things they're doing are radical in this community right now. But talk me through what a relationship looks like with some of these partner entrepreneurs and partner organizations. So you identify a category, violence or poverty, and then you go in and find organizations, or how does this work to where you're now partnering and helping and resourcing and assisting and uplifting someone like Benny and Hope for the Hood?
Yeah, so it starts with understanding what are the biggest challenges. Okay. So a combination of what are our biggest challenges, what are the biggest assets our community has, and then where are areas that Stand Together can contribute. So you've got the sweet spot of needs, local resources, and then national capabilities, right? So in this situation, we looked at things like foster care, neighborhood poverty, addiction, things like that. So we set out, and our belief is that it's a threefold formula. Transformation happens first with mindset, second with relationships, and third with tools. So mindset, learned that from Dr. William Polite. Relationships, the power of relationships, and then tools. Innovative tools that people can use to build a life, not resources that we just consume or services we consume, but tools to grow. So we look at that framework and we say, all right, who are those local leaders
Yeah.
who are in that relationship business? They're world class at this part. And so an example of that would be Hope for the Hood. Others are organizations like the Phoenix, who take a relationship-based approach to addiction recovery.
Sober living fitness is incredible.
100%. And then we look at saying, okay, cool. So people are their mindset is transforming. They're in healthy community, but they still need a job. They still need affordable housing. They still need access to fresh and healthy food. They still need transportation. So then we start looking through, well, who are the innovators who are specializing in these human essential tools? So we've made investments in groups like Drive and Thrive, which is sort of like Habitat for Humanity for cars.
Yeah.
So people earn a donated vehicle. But then we connect them with relationship hubs like Hope for the Hood. So there's been great stories of a young lady who went through a program at Wichita State's business school, an amazing program there. She was being mentored through Hope for the Hood. She got a car through Drive and Thrive. She got a great job with one of the largest employers in the city.
Wow.
So you see this ecosystem come together. So we're just trying to listen to folks on the ground, fill holes in the ecosystem, and then a lot of those we're able to bring the national capabilities here to Wichita.
Okay, 2 points there. I'm going to ask 2 questions. The second question first. We'll talk about the issues and the categories that you're really trying to work in right now, but tell us a little bit about some of these local organizations you're working with. I know several, and several of these entrepreneurs, just a short list. Who are some of the people that you guys are working with closely and trying to empower here locally?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is a group called Hope CDC, Dr. Reverend Kevis Harding.
Yeah.
We actually met Kevis through one of our neighborhood leaders that we worked with, Dr. William Polite, who we mourn his loss so often,
big
like
loss.
a big time leader, big time hero, but he was a leader of leaders. And so there's people filling his shoes doing great things. So we meet Kevis through Dr. Polite, another connection through Kansas Health Foundation. Kansas Health Foundation is doing some incredible work.
Aren't they doing great things?
Amazing stuff. Long-term investments in some of these entrepreneurs. So they made a 10-year commitment to Kevis Harding and Hope CDC.
Yeah,
and so we were able to come in and say, okay, hey, you've got a runway. How do we help you accelerate your vision? So right now he's doing a couple of homes per year, and we partnered up with one of the business leaders in Stand Together and said, hey, what's your big vision, Kevis? He's like, man, I want to do dozens, if not hundreds of homes per year. And so we say, all right, you got the vision, you've got the local relationships. How can we bring some complementary capabilities in to help you scale up?
Yeah.
And so there's some philanthropic capital that we're able to contribute, and then actually some social impact for-profit capital that one of our partners is contributing. And so you see this world come together.
Yeah.
So you talk about Benny, you talk about
That's
Kevis.
one example. Benny, Hope in the Hood. You've got Dr. Harding. What else? There's others out there, man.
Care Portal is doing amazing work. Absolutely. One of my favorites is Kyle Ellison.
Yeah.
I met him when he was leading Heroes Academy.
Yep.
And as I got to know Kyle, first of all, pure entrepreneur.
Yes, he is.
Super creative, principled guy, like amazing. And he was talking about starting a school. And I knew that there were some conversations with Sal Khan about bringing Khan Academy to Wichita, first place outside of California that really, Sal Khan is the most impactful educator probably in the history of the world, certainly the most impactful educator living today. And he says, hey, I want to expand to Wichita, but I need a school leader who really gets unconventional, innovative, individualized education. So I'm hearing Kyle's vision for a school. I'm hearing Sal Khan's vision for a school. It's like, man, these two things come together in a really impactful
There's
way.
Synergy.
And now he's running Khan Lab School inside the Learning Lab.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of stories
Wichita
like that.
State USD 259. They've got presence over there too. They're collaborating multiple organizations. So it's incredible. What about Ben French?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it. You guys still working with Ben French?
I love Ben French. I talked to him just a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So really the work that Shepherd's Way is doing is a fantastic example. So they see a big time problem. So when you, if you're a young adult with a disability, so let's say autism, for example, age 21, you age out of services. So you've gone through all the services for children, and then there's a public solution per se, where you have housing and long-term support. But there's a waiting list of like 4,000 people.
Yeah.
You're never going to get to the top of that list. And so what they said is, all right, so there's a problem here. We're going to innovate a private solution here. And what we love about it is it's actually 10 times less expensive than the public option, and 10 times more effective. This is not charity. We're going to keep you alive until you die. This is hey, you're a human being with dignity.
Yeah.
all these young people are working.
Yeah.
All of them are engaged in healthy community.
Yeah.
And it's just this beautiful idea of this ecosystem applied to a specific population. Yeah. I mean, they are one of the favorite nonprofits in the city.
I know one of my favorites, and Ben French
is that only because he's a baseball guy, though?
He's an old baseball guy, but I love his heart, man.
Yeah.
And you know what's so interesting when I heard Stand Together was getting involved with Shepherd's Way, the synergy in principles is here you have Ben French who's saying, I see individuals with developmental disabilities, and they have impact. They have opportunity in this community. We just got to get them in a space to where we can help them realize their impact. Meanwhile, we have Stand Together saying we believe in the dignity of the individual, that we can maximize outputs when we maximize the growth of the individual and give them structure and help them. And it was just a perfect marriage. I know these organizations. I know there's several organizations. What I want the public to hear, and one of the reasons why I gave Stand Together the Chairman's Award.
Thank you for that, by the way, Ryan.
But why I'm so grateful for you and your staff and this investment that's happening in the city is there is real movement happening. Like there is real. This isn't broken down on party lines or party ideology. Politics has nothing to do with any of these things. Government is very rarely even in the room. I'm only in the room because I invite myself to hear what's going on. But you're saying no. If we want to change what's happening in the trajectory, this painful trajectory in so many areas in this city and in this community, we have to empower the community.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful, man, that the leadership is there and this is happening. Why Wichita?
Yeah.
Like why Wichita? Why is there so much energy with Stand Together right now for Wichita, Kansas?
Yeah. Well, changing the country is a big task. And Mr. Koch is Mr. Big. He's always thinking big. And so Stand Together is a national strategy, all 50 states, hundreds of people we're supporting. But we really believe that cities have an opportunity to show the country a better way. And what's really unique about Wichita is, you know how we're the test market for a lot of restaurant concepts.
We sure are.
Our demographics are right on trend with the country. So we're a great test market. So why not be a great test market for social change, right? But not only are like the demographics online, but Wichita has an entrepreneurial culture that I think can go toe to toe with any city. Yeah. This idea of, hey, we're gonna solve problems in new and different ways, but we're not gonna be sort of this rugged individualism, like we're going to do things ourselves, but there is a spirit of partnership. And to your point, it's across ideology. Yeah. You walk into a room and you've got people who vote Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, everything in between. Yeah. And they say, hey, we care about our neighbors. That's it. And we care about this issue, and we all have a role to play. That's good. And so we really believe that Wichita could be a model for the American dream. That's good, man. What role does government have in this? Yeah. I mean, we talked specifically about the foster care challenges that we have in some of these areas and housing and healthcare and poverty. And it's fair to say government has to have some sort of role in some of these things, right? Am I interpreting that correctly? Yeah. But what role? And who takes the lead here? Is government, is it conduit? Is it catalyst? Should we just stay out of the way and say, hey, you guys handle all these things? Like what is the role of government in a role like someone like me, a county commissioner that cares deeply about these things? Yeah. What's our role? Yeah. I mean, the role of government is really important. And if we had 45 minutes and a bunch of economists here, we could really go deep in this. But just this understanding of again, back to the Declaration of Independence, rights are not given to us by government, right? They are secured by government. So this idea of, the work you're doing in the city, like running the fire department, running, all the EMS and the emergency response and the public safety, we as humans, we have a right to our self and our property and our freedom. And so government has a really important role in preserving a framework for that freedom. That's good. But we see that violated all the time. And this is where the tension comes in, is you see big problems and the human response is to exercise power and control over people versus empowering people from the bottom up. So I'll give you an example. So you see kids who are living in poverty, and the benevolent people out there say, well, I think that every kid deserves their own bed in an air-conditioned home with fresh and healthy food and all the rest, which is great. I'm all for that. I want that for all kids too. But then you start to legislate that. And there are actually states and there are cities where you can actually remove a child from their home and put them into foster care because of some of these just poverty-related things. Yeah. And we view that as an individual liberty issue. And like, we don't want the government to be coming in and taking people's kids away. And so it's one of those issues where you actually see a fair amount of agreement with the left and the right. So you see the folks on the right would be for small government. The people on the left might say, hey, look at this and look at the adverse impact based on race. Right. Our view is that oftentimes government actually erects barriers. And if we can just get out of the way and allow people and communities to solve problems, we'd all be a lot better off.
That's a great segue. Let's talk about some of these issues. Let's start with foster care, because this is where you and I have really found our relationship is under this umbrella of foster care. You had made mention that many times poverty is a connecting link as you begin to look at the system and children that are placed or removed from the home into out-of-home placements. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head at this point in time, but I believe that 40% of these children are being removed because of issues that can have a connecting link to poverty. Now, let me say this. And I owe this to our district attorney, and I owe this to the courts and those that are working sync cases, is this is a very, very tedious, complex issue. Because if you err and a child is harmed, if you err because you want to try to keep children in the home, and when we know there's violence or know there's some sort of issue there, that's dangerous. And the first goal, and there will be times where government does have to step in and remove a child for the home for the child's safety.
That's right.
But I think many people that work in this space, this is certainly my opinion, I believe it's your opinion too, is the goal should be to be more preventative instead of reactive in foster care. Let's try to find ways, particularly with that 40% number that is being removed because of issues that can be related to poverty in some regards. Are there ways to be more preventative and get supports where they need to be from the community so that children never have to enter the system to begin with? That we can keep families together to begin with? Because when they enter the system, the trauma is significant. 70% of these kids will end up touching the criminal justice system. Only 45% will graduate high school. We have data that suggests that 1 in 4, when they do age out of the system, if they move through the entire system, will end up homeless within 2 years. I mean, it is significant, the amount of trauma that happens when a child has to enter care. But if we can keep families together, get the resources where they need to be, in some of these cases, not all, in some of these cases, then we can keep families together. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is that your guys' position as well?
You are so right. You are so right. And let's think kind of high level here quickly. What you're talking about is getting upstream. I love the way Ed O'Malley talks about this. So first of all, he's got a big vision for Kansas to lead the nation in health, which would be amazing. We've got some similar ambitions for Wichita to be a model for economic mobility. So Harvard ranks cities every 10 years. If you're born poor, how likely are you to stay poor? So there's a bunch of interesting data. I can tell you later where Wichita ranks. But this idea of to solve big issues like homelessness, well, we have to think, okay, 50% of the homeless spent time in foster care. So you move upstream to foster care. You look at foster care, to your point, it's something like 28% of kids in foster care are there because of abuse, which is 100% the role of government. You got to come in with guns and protect the kids.
That's right.
Super important. The problem is, 75% of children or so are not there because of abuse, which overloads the system, and they're not able to provide first-class care to the people who really need it. And to your point, there is a fine line between extreme neglect and abuse. And so those are the judgment calls that people way smarter than me will have to make. But what we can all agree on, to your point, is moving upstream to prevent this stuff. Well,
if you begin to look at what just a couple numbers, moving a couple numbers in the right direction, what it does for a community. When the data I just shared, about 70% touch the criminal justice system. And this is a cost, not just a financial cost to a community that is really not sustainable in my view, but it's a moral cost that I think we're too good for this. We're looking at roughly 1,400 kids throughout Sedgwick County right now are in the foster care system. I think we only have 650 or so homes. There's dashboards now where we can look at that number directly. We'll talk about that. But this is really, in my view, a moral issue. And it's an issue that, in my view, frankly, Joe, falls squarely at the feet of the church, is the faith communities have a real significant role to play here. We talked about this. Something was birthed from that very premise. Tell us a little bit about what that was.
So again, you see individuals and families suffering. And so if you're not for a coercive top-down intervention, well, we can't just let these folks suffer in silence. And that's really the power of healthy communities, these intermediary institutions, neighborhoods, churches, recovery groups, businesses, family and friends, like the social fabric around the person. Exactly. So how do we equip and mobilize that social fabric to solve big problems. So you mentioned local churches. This is a very motivated, really just army of caring people in our cities. So there are actually more local churches in America than kids in foster care.
Wow.
More local churches. But if you actually move upstream and you think about actually our target needs to be families, and how do we strengthen families to prevent homelessness?
Shift the focus.
Exactly. Then the numbers get even more manageable. In Wichita, there are 700 mothers whose children have been removed from their homes. And there are 350 to 400 churches. So you can do that math. And this is where it gets back to that kind of entrepreneurial mindset. So Care for Every Family was birthed to say, hey, we want to inform the church. Most people don't understand what's going on. When they think foster care, they think foster care. Oh, we need more foster families. But actually, if we think holistically, it's like, no, actually, we need grandmas who will mentor young moms. We need business people who will meet physical needs, like car seats and diapers and cribs
through
and
the Care Portal.
Through Care Portal. We need folks like my wife, who's the sweetest, and she I've sort of indoctrinated her a little bit. We're not ready to sign up for like foster care forever, but we do sort of junior varsity foster care, which is called Safe Families for Children.
Yes.
So when parents say, "Hey, I'm in trouble," I don't really want to call the government right now because I know what happens when I do that. But I'm going to call my teacher. I'm going to call neighborhood leader, and then they get connected with Safe Families for Children, who provides voluntary, free, temporary childcare. So we'll have a kid stay with us for a week or for a month or a couple months, and that provides an opportunity to really encourage the parents along this journey.
Yeah, and you're creating not just organizations like Care for Every Family Network and Safe Families. Not only are you partnering with these organizations, you're making a safe space where someone, a single mother that needs help, that is afraid to make a call because she's afraid a case is going to get opened up and she's going to lose her kids, that there are opportunities that she can go and receive some respite and receive some help. Let me ask another question.
Yeah.
The government's agent in foster care is DCF, the Department of Children and Families. How are you being received with DCF?
Well, so we always look for partners who share vision and values and bring complementary capabilities. And we have a real gift here in Wichita with Dee Niswanger. She believes in a limited and effective role of the state in foster care. And she's actually inviting, hey, community leaders, help us support these families. And so she's inviting people in, and there is still more work to be done. So DCF is saying, hey, we're going to collaborate, we're going to partner. They've been phenomenal. This morning I was talking with Reverend Bishop Martin from Possum Trot, Texas.
Possum Trot.
And I'm praying for a Possum Trot-like moment in Wichita, where they didn't say, how many can we take? They said, how many need a place? And they ended up this small little impoverished church in the woods of East Texas, took every foster care kid within 200 miles, adopted a ton of these kids. And so it's a similar thing. Like I could imagine as an entrepreneur, there's some times when you run the math and the math just doesn't math.
Right. Yeah.
And so what do you do then? Well, some would say, hey, we need to pray and we need to ask God for supernatural intervention. As a Christian, that's always my first move. But also we need to innovate. We need to say, okay, well, our approach so far, it's just not working. What can we do more of? It's sort of the old joke in the church where it's like, you got to pass through the offering plate again. So imagine, Ryan, one church in East Texas. Imagine 10 churches in Wichita or 50 churches in Wichita, the 80-20 rule, saying like, hey, we're going to make sure every kid who's wanting to be adopted has a home. And every single parent who's experiencing homelessness and his kids are in foster care, we're going to make sure they have a home. Every family that's struggling with addiction, we're going to set them up with the supportive ecosystem to help them thrive. Like you could see a world where the community says yes and can actually solve this problem.
How biblical. Funny how that works, isn't it? The Christians in the churches should be called to the orphan and the widow and the poor. We should be called to those. And I'm grateful that you are involved in these spaces and you're helping to mobilize the faith community in these regards. And you're not, let me say this, Joe, is that Stand Together is not a faith-based organization. Coke certainly is not a faith-based organization, mighty stretch. But you're willing to partner with anybody and everybody that you can collaborate with and bring resources to that sees a need and is willing to adapt to these principles to meet this need. it's unique. I'm watching you guys partner with all kinds of different organizations and people to meet these needs. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Foster care is unique. It's a challenge. I'm very encouraged about where we're at and where we're heading. Let's talk housing.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing in housing? This is a need. You obviously have identified this as a need. Who are you partnering with and what are you guys working on?
Yeah. Well, as you think about sort of the root causes of a lot of these things, the things that we care about most are oftentimes the highest regulated and the least innovated in the world. So you think about education, super important, healthcare, super important, housing, super important, super regulated, which stifles innovation. And so housing is a great example of that. And so across the country, we see this huge crisis. Yes. And we always come at it from so if we took an approach that said, all right, this is a technical problem, right? This is how do we get more vouchers into the hands of people who need them? Right. Well, the problem is there's still not enough supply.
Right.
And so we got to go to the root and we got to say, all right, well, there's an innovation problem here again. And so how do we have new and different types of housing concepts? There's a group that we partner with, a for-profit business who's doing amazing things in social impact called Pad Split.
Yep.
They're actually taking multifamily homes and repurposing them for, they're taking single family homes and repurposing them for single families. Here in Wichita, as we look at the landscape, there's sort of three pieces here. One is the connection to the ecosystem. So folks like Kevis Harding, who are doing housing, but they're doing more than housing, connecting people to workforce and all the rest. So there's the relationship side and ecosystem side. There is the innovation side. So we've got folks who are signing up to put tiny homes in their backyard, who are solving the community issue and the housing issue one person at a time.
Pause for a second, because this is something that you see across the country that's not as common here. They're called accessory dwelling units, ADUs. And what I'm working on after identifying this need and being brought to the attention, what you guys are working on, so government can work together with you in many regards, is we've got to make some adjustments to our zoning laws and regulations and land use to say, no, accessory dwelling units should be done by right. You shouldn't have to come get a conditional use permit from your city council, your Wichita, or your Sedgwick County Commission. Is these should be by right so we can help impact the amount of housing supply and safe housing supply we have in this community. So that's just one example that we're working on right now together to make these things by right.
Yeah, well, it's a great point, though. You talk about the role of government. So often we can use the function of government as a protectionist force to say, like, hey, I've got my nice neighborhood. I don't want anybody to mess it up. Yeah. So I'm going to put a bunch of regulations. And what does that do for the person who's climbing up the economic ladder? Yeah. Well, it makes it pretty hard on them. And so it's a freedom issue, it's a liberty issue, it's an empowerment issue, it's a poverty issue. And so thanks for being a great partner on that.
Well, there's just, we have to identify first the need, right? And you said something in foster care, we see it in housing, and I want to talk about the Lead Wichita dashboard, because we can't make a case for intervention and for action and rally a community unless we first are aware of the challenge. Yeah. So you and Lead Wichita have had conversations, and there's a dashboard that's been launched. Tell me a little bit about that dashboard.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you talk about sort of this invisible movement that's happening, and we're a small part of it. It's way bigger than us.
So I pause. Listen, thank you. Yeah. You're being very humble right now, but I want you to know, and the reason why I wanted you in this seat to talk about what you're doing in your team and stand together is, so you guys are a big catalyst to a lot of these things. Wow. You are bringing resources. You are bringing a principled base approach. You're doing a lot. So yes, you're empowering a lot of entrepreneurs. Sure. They're in the trenches doing the work, but I will say, you don't have to say a word. You guys are doing a lot to help initiate a lot of these things. So I am grateful.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you. So you think about like these movements happening. So I remember 3 or 4 years ago, we were going to Minneapolis with Damon Young when he was leading the Chamber of Commerce, right? And one of the big things that came out of that was the need for dashboards to hold people accountable and elevate problems and all the rest. And so, again, you've got a local social entrepreneur who's innovating here. And then we meet some folks at the national level from For Charlotte out of North Carolina. Yep. And they developed this really simple tool that is really, Von Mises talks about the human action model. Like, how do you get people to act? You got to elevate a sense of unease. Like, there's a problem here. Let's look at this data and see there's a problem here. So we've done that with the dashboard in partnership with Lead Wichita and Damon Young for issues like affordable housing, foster care, addiction and mental health, things like that. So you see a problem, all right? And then you got to move to like change is possible. So you got to have a vision for a better state. So as a part of this dashboard, you'll see stories of local innovators who are having great success.
Yeah.
And then lastly, you got to show a clear path for what's my role in this. We got to move people to action. And so on the State of Our City dashboard, there's a dozen or so opportunities to say, hey, I'm interested in recidivism. I'm interested in affordable housing. Instead of just lobbying my elected officials to solve the problem for me, what is my role in these big issues? And so you can find that on Lead Wichita's website, leadwichita.org, or directly at, I think it's wichita.stateofourcity.com.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, all right, Joe, talking poverty, talking housing, talking education, talking foster care. What's possible here?
Yeah.
Like, what's the goal here?
Yeah.
We're not going to eliminate any of these challenges
That's
or
right.
these complex issues. So if I was to ask you, what's the goal here? What are we looking at? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Like, can you qualify that or quantify that in any way? Like, what's the goal?
Yeah. So I think it was Einstein who said, things that count the most are the hardest to count. And so that's not an excuse, but some of this stuff's really hard to measure. So like the ultimate goal is to see people flourishing. And we know that's way bigger than how much money you earn and things like that. But I'm really compelled by a measure of economic mobility. So I think we talked about this, Ryan. Every year, Harvard, actually it's every decade, Harvard takes anonymized census level data, literally on every American in the country. And they say, okay, if you were born poor, they have your social security number. If you're born poor, how much money do you make when you're an adult? Okay, so 27 years old, let's say. And then they rank cities based on how good is the soil here for economic mobility. So on State of Our City with Lead Wichita, you can find a little article that was written that actually shows the Harvard data from opportunityatlas.org, ranks the cities 1 to 100. Any guess as to where Wichita is, Ryan?
Economic mobility, we'd be bottom third.
Okay. Good guess. Good guess. In terms of progress over the last decade, you're right. But in terms of where we are in the whole, we're slightly above average.
Okay.
So we're 42 out of 100. That was 10 years ago. Over the last 10 years, we basically stayed flat. We're 41 today. And so I would say we're a good city. Like we should be proud of our city. We're a good city.
Yes.
We're a good city for the poor. But we could be a great city for the poor. And so the rankings will come out again in about 9 years from now. The data came out last summer. We've got 9 more years to go from number 41 to what I'd love to see us be a top 10 city.
So that's the economic mobility. That's the measurement.
It's one
that's
of the
goal.
best. It's one of the
all
best.
All these things are tied together.
That's
right. You can't just separate poverty and housing and foster care and education and say, well, if we pull that lever, we're going to solve. Yeah. They're all interrelated. Yeah. This was a tough lesson for me to learn out of the gate, particularly in this role. I saw glimpses of it in ministry, certainly saw glimpses of it in business. Now in elected offices, I see how all these things are interrelated. You can't just pull one lever and solve these problems. Yeah, I mean, it's very, very complex.
It's very complex. And we need to have the humility to say if this is a David versus Goliath, we're David. This is not try harder, get a better factory going. Yeah. This is very complex. We don't have the power to change people. That has to happen inside of them. And our job is to cultivate the soil, right? Yeah. Invest in the soil.
Good. It's good. What are the biggest challenges? What's the biggest one? If you looked at the biggest barrier, I see data, Joe, obviously crime data, 40% of the state's violent crime happens here in Sedgwick County. Yeah. 80% plus of the kids in USD 259 now live under the federal poverty level. I mean, we've got our work cut out for us. Yeah. I was just say, what's the biggest barrier to success and moving into the top 10 of economic mobility? Yeah. What would you say that is?
Yeah. I actually think it's isolation. I think there's a lot of people who are isolated. I love this saying. We got this from our friends at Family Promise who are doing great work in the family homelessness space. They're doing amazing work. And their founder likes to say, people don't become homeless because they run out of money. They become homeless because they run out of people. And we see similar things in foster care. It's like when you have nobody to call when you're facing a hardship.
That's profound.
So if we can solve for isolation and we can see that we need each other, and again, writing checks philanthropically is super important, and volunteering and handing out sandwiches. But if we only do arm's length and we don't have proximity and we don't recognize this principle of mutual benefit, that people experiencing poverty have a lot to offer us. And maybe there's something that we could offer them. And oh, by the way, all of us are experiencing some form of poverty.
Sure. Sure.
And so I think if we can solve for relationships, the other stuff is the easier stuff to solve.
All right, Joe, it's great. Thank you for the work with Stand Together. Thanks for what you're doing. Last question. So we've talked about all that the organization is doing. I want to ask about you now. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Like you have great family history in this community. You're well known. You're well liked. Your family has a wonderful reputation. You're educated. You right out of college got into a great job. You understand finance. But here you are in the trench trying to create these connections on issues that are some would call impossible. Why are you doing this?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it has just been, so much has been given to me. You know, you look at our city and how generous our city's been, just great parents, great schools, great mentors, great church. So I've received a lot from our city. And then as a Christian, like the why goes back to, man, I was laying dead on the side of the road spiritually.
Yeah.
And Jesus came and rescued me. Like, we've been saved by grace.
Yeah, man.
And being saved by grace makes us, as the Bible says, zealous for good works.
Yeah.
And if I had a little more wisdom to add with my zealousness, I'd probably be more effective. But really, it's just like, we've been given so much. And oh, by the way, you know how this is, Ryan. It's more blessed to give than to receive. Like, when we get in the game, like, it's the best way to live. Yeah. And so it's fun to be a small part of that.
Well, there's more details to come. I want the public to know all that you're doing, and you're so humble, and your organization is very humble in all that you're doing. You're very stealthy in all that you're doing as you empower these social entrepreneurs. But I want to keep telling your story because it's a story worth telling. What Stand Together is doing here, we are grateful. There is big momentum happening. There's big relationships, big investment, big resources. There are things happening here that the community really doesn't fully understand because it's not happening from the government level or the elected leader level. It's happening in the trench from the bottom up, the way you've described all along. Joe, Stand Together. Bless you, man.
Ryan,
thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate you.
Bless, man. Thank you.